Now moving forward, we'll be going through the overview of what is time and labor. So, for the people who are new to Fusion HCM, I would just give you some brief about what is Fusion HCM. So, Oracle Fusion HCM is a cloud application which provides you, or which helps the companies to, you know, um, basically simplify their HR transactions. So in one line, I explain Oracle Fusion as it is an application which helps you to manage your HR transactions from hire to retire of an employee. So from hiring the employee to retirement of employee, each and every transaction you can perform in a Fusion cloud, starting from hiring the employee, managing their profiles, then whether it's employees payroll, whether it's employees absence, employees time entries, employees performances, employees compensations, if there are any rewards, benefits, each and every thing can be done in Fusion HCM. Now, but this particular sessions, these are dedicated to Oracle time and labor. So Oracle time and labor in Fusion HCM, it comes under bifurcations of workforce management modules. Workforce management modules includes your time and labor, your absences, your payrolls, your compensations, and your compensation module basically. But under a system, once we use time and labor. Yes, if someone is speaking. Okay. So, if someone is using time and labor, so we create all those test setup steps, or we use all those steps under workforce deployment module, workforce management deployment offerings. So under that, you can configure your time and labor from scratch. So moving forward, this is about Fusion HCM. What is Fusion HCM and where time and labor lies in this particular whole application that is created by Oracle. So now here we'll be discussing the time and labor architecture of how it looks like, from where your time flows, where it gets stored, and to where it gets transferred. So these each and every things, this architecture we'll be discussing here. So yeah. So first of all, we have data sources. We have three bifurcations: data sources, repository, and then your consumers. So from data sources, what we mean is that from where your time is coming, like uh, the time is reported by an employee, and how an employee reports a time. So if you see this first cylinder here, that is a time card layout, time card periods, allowed action. So these are basically the setups we do in our Oracle Fusion, that through which setups, what are the some specific setups, some specific configurations that you need to do to basically create a time card for an employee, so that employee can raise that time card. So you can actually do it manually in Oracle Fusion, where employees creating a time card, doing some time entries, and submitting the time card. So that is one of our data source. Then you have an entry that is based on calendar. Is You have a calendar system where you can basically do your time entries. Employee can do their time entries. So these are the data sources which says that from where your time is coming, how the employee is able to basically do those time entries which are present in the Oracle Fusion system. Then from these data sources, it goes under workforce management repository. Workforce management repository is where your calculations of your times are done, where your basically time entries are stored. We are talking this from the backend perspective, that uh, in our backend applications, this repository stores your time, whatever time entries that are done by employees. So from these data sources, first your time entries gets validated. What do I mean by validated is that whatever time entries employee has done, it has to be validated by the system that are those time entries correct or not. So, for example, a common example that is very common in the requirements is, for example, we as an employees, we need to do 8 hour. Suppose we need to follow a 8 hour shift where you need to work for 8 hours. But and there is a a rule also that you can't report more than 8 hours in the system also, so while you're doing any time entries. So if employee does any time entries which is more than 8, so for example, for a particular day employee does a time entry for 9 hours, so the system validates that okay, the time entry is done for 9 hours and it is an incorrect entry. So system validates that time, and system uh, just throws an exception for the employees to let them know that the particular time that you have reported is incorrect and you need to correct that. So those kind of validations we are talking about here, that whatever time entry is reported by employees should be correct, which should not be in any error, and system validates those time and then it transfers it to the next part. So in the next we have where your time entries get stored. So time entries get stored is here you're calculating, storing, or updating the time entries. So going in detail of this is whatever the reported time is. So from just follow these yellow arrows, whatever these are coming, and follow my cursor as well. So from the data sources, whatever time you're getting, you are validating those time, whatever time entries you're getting. Also, f- with respect to your time entries, you are also getting some absences. As we have discussed in few minutes before when we were discussing about the agendas, that OTL integrates with absences. Integration means that you can basically see some absences which are raised in your time cards, that for a particular day there is a sick leave for employee, for example. There is a particular day there's a sick leave for employee, and in the time cards you can see that okay, this is a sick leave. We don't have to raise any time entries for that particular day where there is an absence. So your time entries, your absences, it gets validated. Then we get it into the repository where your reported time and your absences gets calculated. Your reported time, your absences, if you are seeing these arrows, how this diagram is created, this reported time is calculated. This absences gets calculated through calculation rules. So, calculation rules we'll be discussing in our further sessions, but just to give you an overview, that your time gets calculated, that whatever time you have reported, if there are any calculation that needs to be done regarding that. So, just to give you a brief example to give you some more understanding of this is, for example, we have a requirement kind of thing that uh, the employees' working hours are 8, but there is a policy of overtime as well in the company, that in that company, that employee can, if employee raises any hours more than 8, then it should go to overtime. So now employees basic hours, if I say employees basic hours are 8, but employee reports, now if we talk about reported time, employee reports, for example, 10 hours in their time entries, but the basic hours are 8. So your overtime, now employee worked 2 hours more, so your overtime would be, that is 10 minus 8 would be 2 hours of overtime. Now, what are we saying is that employee can only report their basic time. Employee can only report basic hours. Employee cannot report their overtime. Because working hours are 8, basic hours employee can report is 10. So how system will know that? Now we know that okay, there's a 2 hours of overtime, but system doesn't know. How system will know that the overtime is 2? This is achieved through calculation rules. We can configure certain calculation rules through which system will understand that the basic hours that are basically reported by employee is 10 and overtime is 2. So how system will show us the calculation will be shown as basic hours as 8 and overtime as 2. So this whole gives us the reported time, the reported basic hours of 10. And this is done through calculation, the calculation rules, and those are based on fast formulas. We'll be discussing them in further sessions. But yes, just giving you a basic overview that how the time that is reported by the employee gets calculated in the system. So that's how from calculation we mean by this. So uh, the example that I was explaining regarding the calculation. So I'm sorry that my Excel wasn't visible. So yeah, I was explaining that the basic hours for employee was 8. The basic working hours of employee is 8, but employee recorded more than 8 hours in the system. Employee reported employee reported basic hours as 10. Now, according to the reporting, what should be according to the reported time, basic hours is 10, but system does not give you the flexibility that report this separately, that basic hours 8 and overtime 2. You can't do that. Uh, Though you can do that, but for example, you have a requirement that employee can only report basic hours. You employee cannot report any overtime. It should be automatically calculated by the system. So through time calculation rules, we can basically do that, where your basic hours will be calculated as 8, your overtime is calculated as 2, and this kind of view you can get it in the system. And this is done through your calculation rules, which is basically based on fast formulas. So whatever absences, whatever time that is reported is calculated by calculation rules, and this this calculated time gets stored in your repository. Now, after calculating the time, after storing those time entries, whatever calculations, whatever time entries that are there, after storing, the update status basically means is your time card status gets updated, that okay, now your time is submitted and it is ready for approval. So every basically a common thing is a time card should be approved by the line managers, the managers, but the direct managers of an employees. So your submitted time card, after calculations, after time entries, everything, your submitted time card is now ready to go to approval for managers. Once it is approved by the manager, the system also stores that this time card is approved and now it is ready to get transferred. Okay. So, we were discussing about your time calculated, your time got stored in the repository, then your status of your time got updated, that okay, your time got submitted, it got approved by your managers, and now your time cards are approved and now they are ready to transfer. From transfer, I mean is that now your time entries can be transferred to your payrolls, to your project costings, to your third parties, to your extracts, or for whatever use you want to use your time entries, you can basically transfer that. So, these are some time consumers here. So project costing, that we have discussed, that whatever time that you have reported or whatever time got calculated or reported in the system can be transferred to the project costing, to the projects, and to a project module, and there you can basically see your time entries and you can bill your employees according to the time that they have reported. From global payroll, I mean is that whatever time entries that are transferred to payroll, so we have certain processes which we need to run in a Fusion application, through which your times gets transferred to these particular time consumers. So your for project we have a different process, for payroll we have different process, for third parties we have different processes. So we run those processes through which your time entries gets flowed. So for project costing, we'll discuss about these flows later. So yeah, the time entries got transferred to project costing. For payroll, what I mean is whatever time entries that are reported can be transferred to payroll, and employee can be paid according to the entries that are done. So if, for example, you are talking about overtime, so if there is any overtime, employee will be paid for that overtime, and if there is not, so employee will only be paid their basics. So yeah, these kind of payroll activities can be handled through your time entries. For third party payroll and project systems are that there could be certain scenarios where the client is only using Oracle time and labor, but they are not using Fusion payroll or Fusion projects. So in that case, you base whatever applications, whatever third parties they are using for payrolls or their project system, whatever third party systems they are using, you can basically flow your time entries to that third party systems. So this third party thing actually comes under integrations. So in most of the projects, we have a particular integrated team uh, which handles the integrations of how your time entries flow. So we create some files, some CSV files gets loaded, they get flowed to your third parties. So those kind of things are done. But for time and as a time and labor consultant, if you would say, you just need to make sure that your time gets transferred to cause you can transfer the time to projects, to payrolls, to third parties, and your HCM extracts as well. Then, so this is about the architecture. One thing that we need to see is that about this red arrow. So while validating your time, once we got the time, your time got validated. But if your time gets error, if it's successful, then it goes through the flow. But if not, if your time card got into error, if there are any warnings, then employee corrects that time and again it goes through the flow. So from validation, it went into some errors. Then you again go as a data source. You again as an employee reports the time. Then correct those time. It again gets validated. It again gets calculated. It again gets updated. It again gets transferred, approved, and everything. This whole cycle gets followed again. So this is about the time and labor architecture that we discussed right now. So before moving forward, any questions regarding this architecture or anything we have discussed so far?
Uh, so I have one question. So Bhavna, so regarding the
Ye-
payroll, after entering timesheet, the project costing and global payroll, so using the third party tool like ADP or maybe Paylocity kind of third party tool. So are
Mm.
we going to do any configuration, or maybe are you going to integrate with the third party tool?
So for third party tool, we need not to do any configurations, but there are some uh, so whatever files that the third party of the clients are expecting or they are
Okay.
accepting. So basically, majorly what I know is majorly there are CSV files which we create,
Yeah.
or in some formats we created. So we just need to create those files. We just need to create the data in that format for the client, and those integrations I think can be managed by them. But again, if they need any help from us, so I think in time and labor the only thing we need to do is creating the files. The other integrations is a total integration team which takes it into consideration of actually loading that CSV files to their third party and managing that in their third party. But
Okay,
in
got
time and
it.
labor, we don't have to do anything
Okay.
uh,
So
as
as
part of
a
that.
time and labor, once the timesheet everything is entered and everything, with the data which we are going to share with the uh, payroll team, right?
Correct, correct,
Okay,
correct.
got it. Thank
Right. Yeah. Uh, yes. Any more questions? Ashutosh, you have any questions? Ashutosh, you're on mute if you're speaking something. Okay, fine. So, we'll move forward if we don't have any more questions.